Hey everyone, I hope you've had a great day so far and that you're doing well. For this video we'll be going through unboxing and review of Studio Series Deluxe Class Shatter, and this particular Studio Series figure is release 40 of the line. So this is another variation of Shatter, particularly in her muscle car mode. And Shatter came from the Transformers live action Bumblebee movie. As for this figure, apparently released back in 2019, so it's not a spring chicken. It's probably very hard to find, and for the purpose of this video it has been in its box since 2019. Anyway, front of the box for Shatter. So for the Studio Series at the time, still a lot of plastic still being used. We have the CGI shot of Shatter here, Shatter as in the actual figure as well. I completely remembered about the whole head thing now, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes. Otherwise, it's pretty much everything stock standard for a Studio Series release. Back of the box, Shatter in her robot mode and 23-step conversion into the vehicle mode. Does it actually specifically say what her vehicle mode is? Here we go. Arriving on Earth in 1987, Shatter disguises herself as a 1971 Plymouth GTX and begins her search for Autobot criminals. So there you go. She is a Plymouth. Now I'm hoping similar to Dropkick, this will be really cool, and the robot mode definitely won't be too bad, but we'll see. So obviously it's a different variation from the Shatter we saw with the aircraft mode. Good thing about the the good thing of the good old days of Studio Series, had some previews. So it's Cogman and Scrap Metal. So that's pretty much the box side of things done. Time to open up the box and have a better look. And with Shatter out of the packaging, what do we have? So we have one Shatter, who I did have to tweak ever so slightly for the backpack kibble. Now in terms of accessories, I think they're actually pretty much pre-attached with these things on her forearms, so that's actually kind of cool. So we have one Shatter, we have the manual, and we do also have the backdrop. So I'm pretty sure it's the same image as what was used for Dropkick for his muscle car mode. So that is Shatter in the backdrop. Definitely not too bad looking. Blends in a lot, but definitely not too bad. So that was that. Shatter, we'll come back to you in a second. In terms of your manual, so it'll definitely be interesting to see how the transformation goes. There's some parts that do remind me back to Dropkicks, not necessarily one-to-one, but I feel some of the themes seem to be unified. So Dropkick, I actually did quite enjoy transforming from robot to the vehicle mode, so maybe with a bit of luck, Shatter will be the same. We also do have a step on how to detach the accessories and even attach them quite nicely into the alt mode. And in fact, they might even provide some additional detailing to the alt mode itself. And then, I don't know why this step is here, because this is the alt mode. How to attach the accessories onto the arms, and then Cogman and Scrap Metal as we saw on the back of the box. I will probably need that later. Now, since we know these are not permanently attached, okay, so here we have the two accessories, which basically forearm mounted weapons. They're in black, pure black, there's no extra colours on them. Detailing wise, they do seem to have a bit of nice detailing on them. If I can actually get one of them to come up nicely. And as we saw, they just basically attach into the forearm like so. So there's a peg there. Probably help if I was actually trying to put it in correctly. So that is that. So that's the accessories. Definitely not too bad looking. It is very nice that they just go onto the back of the forearm like so. It does make me wonder, because the hands seem to possibly support it. You can also hold it like an actual handgun. Boy, Shatter, your joints are a little bit on the stiff side. So that's if it's been held like an actual hand weapon. And then on the other side we have it being used, mounted on the forearm. So that's the accessory side of things. Now, Shatter. Can you stand on your own 2 feet? Yes, you can. Now what I will do is I will actually detach these just so that they're not terribly in the way. Okay, so Shatter. Shatter from the front, the side, we'll come back to that, from the back, the other side, back to the front. In terms of some of the detailing, now I do remember I know what they were trying to do, but I think execution wise on the head didn't necessarily come out quite well. I think the head sculpt was a little bit of contention for some people back in the day. But otherwise, the detailing does look quite impressive on Shatter. So, similar to Shatter when we last looked at her for her aircraft mode, still pretty much predominantly red and black, with a good amount of silver, some dark silver, well, maybe not dark silver, let's just stick with dark silver. The dark silver throughout the body. So that is very nice. So colors wise, I do quite like the colors for Shatter. As for the kibble, there is definitely a bit there, which is unfortunate. Now, thankfully, these side bits actually do tuck in fairly nice, and it's also been designed that there's a nice little peg that the actual top part of the vehicle can peg into, so it does try to keep it relatively secure. It may not be 100% flush, but it's definitely not too bad. And as I said, there's that peg there to keep it attached, which I think is actually a good thing. Now, articulation. Let's try and do this quickly. Head will do a 360 and it will go up and down as well, so a very well articulated head. As for the arm, yes, the arms can come off their socket like so. So the arm can do a full 360 at that shoulder ball joint, but you may have noticed it was a little bit tight and risky. The arm can go all the way to the side, can go all the way to the front. It will hit some other stuff on Shatter, which is unfortunate. The arm can also go all the way to the back. So that's very nice. So we do have some of that extra motion thanks to that ball sockets. We have a very stiff elbow bend, pretty much a standard elbow, but that lower arm can do a full 360 thanks to that shoulder bend in there as well. So that's cool, and then otherwise the rest of the hand is pretty much stationary. There's no waist swivel, which I believe is to be expected. As for the legs, wow. She will not be doing the splits anytime soon, just because the legs actually don't go that far out to begin with. The leg can go pretty much to the front, which is good. Just bear in mind that you'll contact some of the backpack. Can go down to the bottom as usual, and can probably only go so far to the back as a figure. So that's pretty much and we do have a little bit of rotation and hinging and things like that at the actual hip joint. As for the knee, so there will be a 360 spin just above that knee, well, not even 360, but there's a good amount of spin there. It just is a little bit odd because when I tried, I was starting to move a few things unnecessarily. As for the knee bend, standard knee bend, not a problem there. You also do get a little bit of a bend forward as well, which is very cool. Nothing else in the lower leg, and you will have some motion available within the feet. Okay, so that was pretty much a quick look at the articulation for Shatter in her robot mode. Now, I don't think the figure is a complete hand grenade, but I had some reservations about it. Unfortunate, but they are what they are. So now that the robot mode is done, time to transform Shatter into her alt mode. Have a quick look at that and then post some final thoughts. Okay, and with Shatter now in her alt mode, that did take a bit longer than I was expecting, and once again I'm glad I didn't record it because that would have just felt like ages and ages. So before I get into anything about the transformations, so Shatter's alt mode, which is okay, but we'll see. From the front, the side, back, the other side, the top, and the bottom, which is not terribly unneat, but could be a little bit better. And maybe just if I can get some of these detail shots on the alt mode. So definitely not a bad looking alt mode once everything does come together. There's definitely some tabbing opportunities in there, so once things do come together they should stay together fairly well. In terms of articulation, well, the only real articulation is in the wheels, which will move independently. Not very smooth, quite possibly because I've modeled up to the transformation, but that's okay. So that's definitely the articulation there. In terms of the colors, it's still very much the same color palette that we've seen before, but because it's a bit of a muscle car, we've pretty much got the first part of Shatter in red and the back being more of a black. So obviously not a bad color palette for the Plymouth. We do have some nice silver and dark silver at the front, as well as a bit on the underneath here for some of the trimming. So overall, color-wise, I mean, I'm always partial to red and black anyway, but I would say color-wise, Shatter's doing quite well. Now, so we've had a quick look at the alt mode, the wheels, general looks. Transformation into the alt mode, well, it wasn't super terrible. It was a little bit confusing in some places, and then I just started to do the transformation as a bit of a free flow, based on what seemed reasonable. So it's definitely not too bad. It's just getting used to where things are going, especially given that drop kick was a bit more of an easier one to handle. Now, one thing I have noticed a lot during the transformation process, and this is for my particular version of Shatter, it may or may not have anything to do with the rest of the Shatters that were ever released. The ball socket for where the arms attached to, the socket itself can be quite loose, so I did pop off the arms on multiple occasions. Sometimes it was a good thing, sometimes it was a bad thing. So that was the transformation. Otherwise, everything tabs quite nicely once you figure out what you're doing with things. Now, I'll at some point need to transform Shatter back from this into the robot mode, so that can also tell another story based on that direction of transformation. Okay, so I think that's pretty much a bit of a decent coverage over the alt mode and the transformation in terms of my final thoughts for Shatter. So with the manual back, terms of the robot mode, visually, robot mode definitely wasn't too bad. The colors were nice. I will admit I do like the variation of the main weapon accessories, either being forearm weapons or potentially being held in the hand. I think that's a very cool option. Some of the things that I thought were a little bit weaker for the robot mode. One, the head. I have an idea what they were trying to do, but I think execution here in this case, not so good. The arms, they're going to pop off irrespective of alt mode or robot mode, so that was a little bit unfortunate. Articulation is fine, wasn't super great, wasn't super terrible. And I think the only other thing that I would probably have as a criticism is just some of the back kibble. Yes, it does tab to the back of Shatter, but its presence alone is still there, and they did their best to try and minimize it. I'll give them that. So that's the robot mode perspective. So overall, not terrible, but not great. Transformation process to get to the alt mode, as I mentioned before, it was a little bit confusing to begin with, but after a while it does become a bit intuitive. So it's definitely not a bad thing, but I will be performing it a few more times in the upcoming week or so, or possibly even day. Point of recording this video, it is actually at least 1 day late. As for the alt mode, I do like the colors. I think the alt mode for Shatter is probably weaker than the alt mode for Dropkick. Dropkick came together quite nicely, but Shatter, there are just some bits that felt a little bit not terrible, but not as clear cut. But still, in the end, I did manage to get to the alt mode without spending too much time, so that wasn't too bad. Otherwise, the alt mode is still your typical alt mode. The wheels will move, and that's about it. So, depending what you're doing, you may or may not choose to pick up this version of Shatter because of minimal playability, for example. So those were pretty much my final thoughts for Shatter. So overall, what would I do about Shatter? At this point in time, being 2023, and if you can find it for the cheap, I would say pick one up just to be a completionist. I think of the two figures that was released for Shatter, I want to lean towards her aircraft one was probably the better of the two. But in saying that, both figures were riddled with some back kibble issues, so just trying to think if there's anything else. Robot mode talked about, transformation, alt mode. Yeah, so overall, like, Shatter hasn't been a terrible figure for either versions, but I think Dropkick definitely, of the four of them, between their aerial mode and their land-based mode, Dropkick's land-based figure, I feel is probably the best of the four. But once again, that's my perspective. As for this version of Shatter, it's definitely not terrible. There are some strong things that work for it, but at the same time there are some negative things, and they do actually start to balance out, which is unfortunate. I think I'm going to leave the unboxing and review there. So thank you very much for watching this unboxing and review video of Studio Series Deluxe Class Shatter number 40 of the line. Feel free to leave a like or comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. All of this does help support the channel, and I do greatly appreciate it. Extra content can also be found on my Instagram account. Label of the account is basically the same as this YouTube channel. At the same time, there'll also be a supplementary / complimentary short to go with this as well, so definitely keep an eye out on that. But then that's been a usual rule of thumb that I try to do. So I'll definitely do some extra content between Shatter and Dropkick later on. Not sure if it will be a short video or a series of shorts. Haven't decided, but it would be nice to get each of the triple changes basically all together as best as possible. With that being all said, stay safe and take care, and I will catch you all in a future video, which could be anything at this point in time on the channel. See ya.